Good morning, Rabbi Rabotai. We are continuing on Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim in Chot Tfilah Siman Tzadi, and we are starting Seif Yud. Maran writes, "Kshomed im hatzibur, asur lo lakdim tefilato litfilat hatzibur." When you are standing with the tzibur in the Bet Knesset, you cannot start your tefillah earlier than them. This is a Gemara in Masechet Brachot Daf Kaf Chet, that it's considered a disrespect to the tzibur. When you're standing in the shul and then you daven earlier, you don't wait for the tzibur to daven together. We spoke already about the obligation of a person davening bet tzibur, the obligation of a person coming to shul, not staying at home if they at all can participate in the tzibur. We already spoke about all of that. And even though that we mentioned that even if you're sick at home, you have COVID, and you're staying at home davening b'yahid, you still should daven b'sha'ah tzibur mitpalelin, the time that tzibur is davening. But there's no isur, there's no prohibition not to daven. It's better to daven at the same time exactly that the tzibur is davening. But when you're at the shul already, and then you want to just jump ship and go earlier, and you want to daven earlier than the tzibur, that already is asur. You cannot do that. Now, if a person must because they're going, to miss their flight or whatnot, then you go to the side room and daven. That would be best way possible. And the details of what happens if the tzibur is davening late. Now, I'm not doing anything wrong. The tzibur is going to miss the Siman tefillah. Their tefillah is going to be b'di'evet. Can I daven earlier? Or how about if I daven a very long Shemona Esrei, right? Very long Shemona Esrei. So if I daven starting with the tzibur, I'll miss Nakdishach, I'll miss even Hagel HaKadosh, I'll probably even miss Modim. Can I start davening a few brachot earlier, like 2 minutes earlier, and this way I could catch on when finishing with the tzibur and answering Nakdishach? Can I do that? How about when the times change? Sometimes you have a fellow that looks at the watch and says, "Oh, if I start a minute early, I could catch tefillah with Netzach Hama." So they're not up to it because they have a set time, but I know that Netzach Hama is in a minute. So if I go a little quicker and start a minute earlier than the tzibur starts the Shemona Esrei, I could catch tefillah b'netz. That's a tremendous ma'ala. Can I do that, or is that also asur? Right? These are all questions that happen on daily basis, and we're going to be studying them in the next 5 minutes. Says Maran, how about if Shah is overed? If the time of tefillah is passing and the tzibur is taking their time, and they're going to miss Siman of tefillah b'tzibur, says Marash Charuch, En hatzibur mitpalelim lefi shema'arichin b'piyutim o lesiva acheret, then you are allowed to daven earlier than them, even in the shul. No problem with that. Now, we'll see there are those achronim who say, well, even in that scenario, if you could go to a side room or you go back home and daven alone, that would be best. But Maran Shulchan Aruch allows this. Maran says it's mutar to daven without the earlier than the tzibur. If the tzibur is going to miss the Zman Tfilah, you're not expected to miss Zman Tfilah because you want to daven b'tzibur and be respectful. Well, they should have been more respectful to Hashem and not daven in a b'di'evet tfilah. If they're davening missing Zman Tfilah, you daven earlier, and that's fine. The Ramah adds, Ramoshe Israelis, aval belo sha'ah overet, if the time of tefillah is not passing, yitpalel ha'piyutim v'atchinot im ha'tzibur. You should daven with the tzibur, even though that you have a faster mind. You could read much quicker, and you could catch in a little bit of a learning over here, a little bit of a learning over there. Lo yifrosh min hatzibur, afilu la'asok b'divrei Torah. You should not separate yourself from the tzibur. There is value in sticking to the community. Al tifrosh min hatzibur chazal. Tell us, do not separate yourself from the tzibur. And it is, as long as the tzibur is not doing something wrong, you should stick to the community because there's value of community. We spoke about commitment and consistency a few days ago, how they are the platform and the pillars of chinuch, of continuity of Am Yisrael. When a child sees that my father is committed to this cause, rain and shine. I had a chavruta that he used to tell me, he says, my father, my whole life I grew up, never ever saw him daven at home. Mr. Minyan, never. So only once, I never forget, only once, he was extremely sick, and it was, a blizzard outside, it was snow up to whatever, That's the only time that he davened at home. It was ill. So he was maybe 40 years old when he told me this. Still etched in his memory the commitment of a father to a minyan, right? Or my other Havruta, he's world-class Dayan, Rosh Kolel, a Dayan, and he still says, my Rav says this, my Rav says that. His Rav is a tremendous Tamei Chacham, but not as big as him, certainly in the area of Choshev Mishpat, nothing compared to him. But nevertheless, his father took him to this shul, passing many shuls. Says, this is our Rav, this is our Bet Knesset, and that's a healthy thing of Al Tifrosh Min HaSibur. So they're doing a little bit slower, a little singing here, a little singing there. You stick to the pace of the Sibur. The kavod that you have to the communal events and affairs is something very important in the subtotal overall health of a community. A person should be mindful of this. It's not just about me. We are all obligated to be dedicated to the cause of a community. And a community is only a community when it's homogeneous, when things are unanimously done together, and every individual has that awe and respect and reverence towards the concept of community. So that's something that has to be developed in mind and has to, of course, be adhered to by the individuals, because just like every society is about families, right? People focus a lot on societal standards. It's a waste of time. Every society is composed from families. If the standards of family are falling apart, if the unit of family is melting and dissolving, then you can't have a healthy society. It's pashut. Right? It starts from a unit of family. So here also, a society, a community is comprised from Yechidim, individuals. If every individual doesn't have a kavod for the subtotal of what a community is, then you don't have a community. It starts from individuals being respectful to the concept, and that's one of the basics of this isur. Why is it the isur to daven earlier? Because you're disrespecting the tzibur. Right? And as we'll see, even sometimes that you have legitimate reason, you're not feeling well. You're not feeling well. There are those poskim who say, I'm not feeling well, I could daven early and go. Chachamai says, no, you cannot do that, because according to Maran Shulchan Aruch, if the Sibur is not doing anything wrong, they're not missing Zman Tfilah, they're davening proper. You feel sick, nobody sees that. Nobody knows how you feel. So go outside with Knesset and daven. Don't stand in the Bet Knesset and daven earlier than them, because you're disrespecting Tzibur, and nobody knows that it's not really a disrespect, it's just that you're not feeling well. So in the eyes of an onlooker, it looks like a disrespect. It's not a proper thing to do. We have to guard the values of a community. The kavod of a community is something extremely important. Because if you don't respect it, you have no community. If the individuals are not sensitive to respecting values of a community, whether be it respecting shul, not speaking in the shul, whether being respecting tefillah, not allowing b'shum ofen kiddush clubs and all this garbage that has become prevalent, unfortunately, in the communities. It's not Rabbanim's job, it's the Balabatim's job not to allow it, right? Because the disrespect to the tefillah is disrespect to the decorum of a shul, is a disrespect to the decorum of a community. If you don't let the breaches of kavod in a community, then you'll have a healthy community. And that Chazal saw that, and Chazal were very strict about keeping a certain decorum in a shul, in a community, because of these values. Because if you have a healthy home for a community, then you'll have a healthy community growing up. So says the Mishnah Berura here, Ima tzibur asur, when you're with the tzibur, is prohibited to daven earlier, afar gav, even though that we said in previous saif that at home also you have to daven at the same time, but there, if you're beyachid at home, it's a mitzvah to daven at the same time that tzibur davens, but it's not asur to daven earlier. But here, when you're kashomed im tzibur umaktim, then isur anami ika, then it's even a prohibition of a isur. Now, when we say La'akdim Tefilato, the Kaf HaChaim writes something very interesting. Writes the Kaf HaChaim, this is something that the Or Letzion writes as well. Or Letzion says that if a person davens a long Shemona Esrei, he should not start earlier than the Tzibur. Because you're starting earlier, it's disrespectful. Chacham Ovadia says, no, that's not a problem. Because 2-3 brachot earlier, and the majority of your tefillah, you're davening b'tzibur, and people see at the end also that you're not leaving earlier, you're just finishing your tefillah with everyone else. You're doing it l'sorech, that's considered still tefillah b'tzibur, so that's not a big deal, says Chacham Ovadia. He also writes that if you want to do the other case we mentioned, that if you want to daven benetz, you want to daven benetz hachama, and that netz is a minute earlier than when the Shaliach Tzibur is starting Hashem's Fatay, you could start a little earlier to catch tefillah benetz, and then the majority of your tefillah, you're still davening b'tzibur. However, this says that's also fine. It's not, so even though that Or Letzion, Chacham and Rabbi Shaul is much more stringent about this, says no, you daven with the tzibur, and this is aligned with his shita, that as long as the majority of your tefillah, you're davening b'tzibur, it's considered tefillah b'tzibur, he allows this as well, that in order to catch tefillah with vatikin, with netzach hama, or in order to catch your pace with the end of tefillah and be able to answer nakdishach and kedusha and so on, that would be allowed as well. So Mishnah Berura writes, when the time is passing and the tzibur is not going to make the tefillah on time, even if you're in Bet Knesset, it's still mutar to daven earlier, even publicly, in front of people. And that really stems from that Gemara in Masechet Brachot. And if you take a look at the back of the Masechet Brachot, you have a Perush of Rishonim called Talmidei Rabbeinu Yonah. The yeshiva of Rabbeinu Yonah was one of the Gedolei Rishonim. He was actually a mechutan with the Ramban. Ramban was younger than Rabbeinu Yonah, but his son Shlomo married the daughter of Rabbeinu Yonah. So Rabbeinu Yonah's students have a Perush on Masechet Brachot. It's printed in the back of every Gemara. So there, in Daf Yutet, Amud Aleph of the Fe'arif, there it says over there that even publicly in the shul, you could stand and daven earlier if the tzibur is going to miss Siman Tefillah b'tzibur. The Bach argues with that. The Bach says that's only when the time is so short, mamash, you're missing Siman Tefillah in 5 minutes, you have no time to go home. If you have enough time to get out of the shul and daven somewhere else, you should not, says the Bach, stand in the middle of a tzibur and deviate from the tzibur. Even though that they're doing something wrong, says the Bach, you still have to get out of there and not disrespect them in front of them. That's what the Bach says, right? And if you don't have enough time, and the time is going to pass by the time you get home, then daven in the shul, and that will be fine. Now, the Kaf HaChaim seems to hold not like the Bach, and he says it's mutar to do it in the shul because Maran holds like that, and the time is passing. It's fine to do it, even if you have enough time to go home. You don't have to necessarily go there. Now, the Gemara itself says a story that one of the Amoraim was not feeling well and he davened at home, biyachid. So it's clear from the Gemara that if you are weak and you're sick, a person could daven at home, and you could daven before the tzibur. You don't have to wait for the tzibur necessarily, because the guy needs to eat something afterwards and so on. He's weak, he doesn't have to wait long. Now, but in Bet Knesset, if you're in Bet Knesset and you're weak and you're not feeling well, is that mutar that I should daven publicly in front of people ahead of the tzibur? No. It's asur, says the Chafetz Chaim. Bet Knesset afzeh asur. And then he sends you later on to take a look at it, and so on. But the Maaseh, the Kaf HaChaim says also that according to Maran Shulchan Aruch, it will be asur to daven earlier than the tzibur, then deviate from them publicly in the eye of the tzibur. Even if you have a legitimate reason that you're not feeling well and so on, get out, do it in a different room. Don't stand out in middle of the tzibur. Again, we read these details, we're like, come on. We'd be happy that people are davening, right? But the truth of the matter is that we don't pay enough attention to the importance and the legitimacy of unanimous action of a tzibur, of a homogeneous tzibur that people have respect for. When you have standards, I want to just speak about this for 1 minute. We live in a generation, unfortunately, that we are dissolving any and every standard. Everything goes. Like the more strange you become, the more popular you are, right? And we talk about standards. I always ask this question for people: how do you define standards? By things that you do, or by things that you don't do? That's why everyone wants to have high standards, right? Everyone thinks that high standards are good things. So, what is the definition of standards? Things that you do, or things that you don't do? Now, let's go through it. If you say, a place has very high standards, what does that mean? There's a lot of things you cannot do, right? The dress code, whatever it is. They say this place has a lower standards, right? That means a lot more that you could do and get away with. When everything goes, you could do anything that you want, that is no standards. So contrary to what we think, standards are things that we don't do. So everything that you don't do, you have a higher standard. When you have a community that certain things don't fly, you can't come with a certain dress code to tefillah. You can't do certain things in the shul. You can't speak freely, or whatever conduct that's not accepted. That's a higher standard. And when you keep a higher standard, you have pushed for a entity that there is kavod in it. There's respect. You go to right now the only institution that has kavod in the United States is the courtroom. You go to a federal courtroom, if phone is on, $1,000 fine. There you go. You can't go with a certain dress code. You can't address the judge with you. It has to be your honor, right? There's only remnants of kavod, but it is important. It is important to keep in mind that it's not necessarily good when everything flies, because then you don't have a healthy, by osmosis, chinuch for the next generation. It used to be that certain things you didn't have to say. People learned it by osmosis, by living in the community, the certain positive values that people learned. Right now, we're heading towards a generation that there's no osmosis of positivity. Anything flies. No respect for elders, no respect for authority. Right? The more you could make fun, and even the dress code, used to be nobody would go with a ripped clothing anywhere. That was considered like the more ripped it is, and still you could hold the fibers of the clothing together, and it's completely ripped. The more expensive it is. It's a crazy generation, right? And used to be the tattoo. I mean, tattoos is a whole thing by itself, but used to be the truck drivers and gangs, they had tattoos. You would never see a doctor or a lawyer with that. Right now, I'm not taking sides. A tattoo, yes, tattoo, no tattoo. Of course, having a tattoo in the Torah is asur, right? Ketovet kaka is one of the isurim of the Torah, right? But forget about that for a moment. And also, it's beyond me how a person would eternalize anything on their body aside from the emunat HaKadosh Baruch Hu and so on. But doctors and lawyers and professionals did not have these things. Now you go to a hospital, if you see a doctor without it, you think twice. Like every professional, every doctor, every lawyer has tattoos on. It's become like an in thing, right? And again, that is something that is breaking certain things that used to be pashut, used to be accepted. And now, unfortunately, we don't have that. So to respect communal standards is something that we can't stress enough how important it is. And it has to be a unit that people respect and people guard the respect of that unit. It's not the rabbi's job or the gabai's job. It's everybody's job to protect the honor and the values of a community. The honor and values of a makom kadosh, of a bet midrash, of a bet knesset. And, if people would do it, if one person would just schmooze in the shul and then 50 people will go up to him and say hello, respectfully, without embarrassing him in public. Afterwards we go, it's like, you don't talk in the shul. It's not respectful, it's a little kavod. Have a little kavod for Ribbon Shalom. Right? Then it would not happen again. And Bet Knesset would be, the kids would come to the Bet Knesset. They would know, this is a place that I'm dedicated to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You don't daven earlier because it's a kavod for the tzibur. What do you mean you daven earlier? It's disrespectful. You daven with the tzibur. You follow the pace and the thing of the tzibur. When we think about it, we don't see it as something important. But when you start really thinking about it, you're like, wow, this is what makes up a tzibur. This is what creates, harmony in the keilah, and the keilah that has harmony grows in a healthy way. Grows in a healthy way, and people want to be a part of something that has the power of tzibur. When something is a power of tzibur, everyone wants to be a part of it. But when things are haphazard, then you're like, okay, I'll be my own thing. And then tomorrow, instead of coming to shul, you go to the beach. There's not a value anymore. But something that's held up as a value is something important for the tzibur. B'ezrat Hashem, we will continue this in the days to come.